Okay, everybody, I'm going to get this thing started here in just a second. There we go. I'd like to welcome everyone to the What to Expect During Your Stage 1 Audit webinar. My name is Joe Krolikowski. I am the QMS Program Manager for Perry Johnson Registrars. A couple of notes for everyone. First of all of our participants are on mute. But we absolutely want to address your questions, so please utilize the question portion of the dashboard. We will be addressing questions at the end of the presentation. One of the more common questions that we get is whether or not this presentation will be made available after we're done today. We do make all of our presentations available in two ways. If you'd like to get a copy of the slides, they will be available for download from our website shortly after we're finished. And if you'd like to rewatch this webinar with the voiceover, it will be accessible on our YouTube page. And the link for that can also be found on our website. Now, our presentation today is going to go over why certification is conducted in a two-stage process. We're going to start kind of at the beginning with the quotation phase, and what we try to do before the Stage 1 audit takes place. We'll go through what happens on a Stage 1 audit from front to back, so to speak. We're going to highlight some things that can prevent continuance to a Stage 2 audit and what you should do in response to the results from the Stage 1 audit. I'll have a few concluding remarks, and then we will address your questions. So first of all, why do we do certification in two stages? Well, the short version is we are required to. We are an accredited certification body. We have multiple international accreditations. And one of the many requirements that we're held accountable to as an accredited certification body is ISO 17021-1. Now you can think of 17021 as sort of a ISO 9001 for certification bodies. Now that document, the 17021 standard, includes a clause that requires that initial certification audits need to be conducted in two stages, Stage 1 and Stage 2. Now there's a number of reasons why it's done this way, but the primary reasoning is to ensure that only companies that are truly prepared for certification go through the complete and full audit. So there is kind of an eye on efficient use of audit resources in having a separation between Stage 1 and Stage 2. Now, obviously, before we can conduct your audit, you need to be a contracted client. And we use a set of we have a series of application documents. They're all referred to as F1, and we have an F1 document for multiple different scopes. We have one for ISO 9001, we have an F1 that's specific for ITF 16949, and so forth. And the reason that we do this is we want to make sure that we are gathering as much information as we can relative to what certification you're seeking, so that, among other things, we can be as competitive as possible in quoting your certification project. One of the other requirements that we're held accountable to is from the International Accreditation Forum, or IAF, and that is MD5. Now, so for an ISO 9001 audit, the audit time that we use, it comes right out of MD5. And MD5 also indicates that the maximum discount we can give is 30%. So we try to gather as much information as possible so that if there are discounts that can be applied, we can apply those discounts and give you a competitive quote. So if you have two certification bodies that you're considering, and you get two quotations and they're just wildly different, you might want to look carefully at that certification body that's giving you a quote with just a dramatically reduced amount of audit time. It's possible that they're not an accredited certification body within the IAF framework, and that's definitely what you want if you're going to be bidding on things like automotive or medical device and so forth. IAF MD5, incidentally, it is a public domain document, and if you want to get a copy of it for yourself, all you need to do is go to Google and enter IAF MD5. You can get a copy for yourself. Now, once you are under contract with PJR, you'll be assigned to an audit program coordinator. You'll probably refer to this person as your scheduler. And this person is going to be your primary point of contact on your account. So obviously scheduling dates, but you can also reach out to this person if you're wondering what's going on with your certificate or any other matters. All of our team here, if you get someone on the phone and they can't help you, they'll find the person who can. So we definitely, our schedulers, it's a great team, and we definitely encourage you to stay in touch with them with questions that you have. Now, obviously, our schedulers are going to try to assign an auditor to you that's going to best fit your profile. Now, they are required to assign someone that's competent in your technical area. Obviously, we recognize that for a lot of clients, travel cost is a concern. So we do try to provide someone that's in the neighborhood, so to speak. But bear in mind, the most important thing is that it is someone who is technically qualified to perform the assessment. Now, once they've got some of these preliminary arrangements made, the auditor is going to send you a document. It's a checklist, really. And you can think of it as an attestation of readiness. This is from our F108 series of documents. So let's go over what's on that F108 on the next slide here. So as I said, the F108, it reads a lot like a checklist. And what you are affirming by completing the checklist is that you've done all the things you are required to do in order to be ready for your stage 1 audit. So I've got some of the more common things listed here. That you've determined your scope, that you know what your processes are, that you've gotten an internal audit complete, that you have a complete management review, that you have controls in place on outsourcing, that you have all of the required documentation, and so forth. So by filling out this checklist, you're basically saying, yes, we are ready for our stage 1 audit. And so there shouldn't be any surprises when the auditor comes in and starts asking for some of these items. The last item I've got on my bullet list here is PJR Form F191. Now, this is an optional item, but we do encourage you to consider using it. And I'm going to show you why on the next slide here. Now, the F191 as a tool for stage 1 planning, it's been around a very long time. And what we use it for is to give our clients a space to demonstrate that the processes they've established for the quality management system, that they represent a fulfillment of all the clauses of the applicable standard. So obviously, one of the things that you're required to do when you establish your quality management system or your environmental management system or whatever it is you're implementing is to determine what are your processes. Well, the intent is that by establishing those processes, there is going to be fulfillment of all the applicable clauses. So let me show you how this works over the next couple of slides here. So let's say, for the sake of discussion, that this is your interaction of processes. Now, in the lower left corner, you can see that we have 6 named processes from this interaction here. So our 6 processes are sales order entry, purchasing, production, shipping, quality, and support. So with those being your processes, let's organize them now on the PJR form F191. Okay, so here is the completed F191. And as you can see on the left, we've got our 6 named processes. And across the top, we have the clause numbers. So as you can see, there are some clauses that impact multiple processes, 7.5, for example, which is where we find the documentation control requirements. So that makes sense. That would be a requirement that would impact every process. We also have a process that reflects on almost every clause, the support activity. And again, that also makes sense from a particular point of view. So by filling in this grid in this way, the organization is demonstrating, okay, these are the processes that we have, and by these processes, we have met each and every one of the clauses from the standard that we're trying to get certified to. That's the intent of this. Now, a stage 1 audit is typically going to be conducted either on-site or virtually. We do offer what's referred to as an off-site stage 1 audit. And in that arrangement, you are emailing materials to your auditor, and they're kind of reviewing them on their time. It's treated as off-site time. Now, that can be advantageous in some situations, but what you have to remember is the on-site audit time requirement still has to be met. So when you look at IEF MD5, there's a particular block of time that needs to be met for what they call stage 1, stage 2. So when we quote you, we'll apportion a piece of that for stage 1 and a separate piece for stage 2. If you decide to have an offsite stage 1, now we've got to put all of that on-site time on stage 2. So bear that in mind if off-site time, if an off-site stage 1 is something that you're considering. Now, whether the audit is going on-site, virtual, or off-site, you should be contacted by your auditor at least a few days in advance of the audit, and you should receive an audit plan. And it's definitely important that you go through that audit plan, make sure that everything is correct, and let your auditor know if something isn't correct. You know, the auditor is only working from their assignment sheet, and the assignment sheet is rooted in what we've learned from the contract that we've established with you. So sometimes mistakes are made, sometimes information is misunderstood. So it's very important that we get those details right as soon as possible if a mistake has been made. Now, again, whether conducted on-site or virtually, the stage 1 audit will begin with an opening meeting. This is a great chance for you to confirm any last-minute changes, make sure that your auditor is aware of any critical information, any visitors that you're expecting to have, any key people that will only be available at certain times, and so forth. The stage 1 audit will then proceed from the opening meeting according to the auditor's plan. And the auditor is going to use a designated workbook, a stage 1 workbook, to record the results of their assessments. Now, just about everything that we look at in a stage 1 audit is documentation based. So there's a lot of paperwork. It is essentially a conference room audit. And everything that they look at is going to result in one of two possibilities. Either the item is going to be judged as conforming, or it's going to be flagged as a concern. Now, a concern is basically anything that represents a disconnect between what you've implemented and the related requirement from the applicable standard. Now, once the auditor has completed their review of the required materials, they're going to put their audit report together. There are no nonconformances in a stage 1 audit. It is, I've often explained to people that the stage 1 audit is sort of the one and only time that you have an audit where we're going to tell you what's wrong and you get to fix it without having to go to all kinds of extents, such as you would in later audits where you'd be expected to do a full corrective action. Now, the closing meeting will go over the results. That'll happen, obviously, the day of the audit. And in most circumstances, you should expect to get your completed stage 1 report the day of the audit as well. Now, there are a few possible outcomes. Firstly, the one we want, recommended for continuance to stage 2 with no concerns. That's obviously the ideal outcome. The second possibility is a recommendation for continuance with only minor concerns, maybe just a few little things that you need to take a peek at. It is possible that you will not be approved to continue to stage 2. There may be significant concerns identified that are going to require a full repeating of the stage 1 audit. That is a possibility. More commonly, you may have concerns that are going to require verification by PJR headquarters before the stage 2 can be approved to proceed. We're going to go over what that means in just a couple of minutes here. Now, you will be asked to sign an acknowledgement of the stage 1 results. And as I mentioned earlier, it is our policy that the stage 1 audit report be given to our client at the end of the audit. Now, under extreme circumstances, there may be a travel situation, what have you. It may be a few additional days before you get the report, but in most circumstances, the auditor should be able to put that report in your hands at the end of the stage 1 audit. That is certainly what we train them to do. So let's talk a little bit about what can prevent continuance to stage 2. There's a number of things that are potentially going to be very significant. Firstly, if you have not done an effective job of determining what your processes are, if the auditor asks for the interaction of processes document and you don't have one, or you have an IOP that bears no resemblance to what your actual processes are, or you have an IOP that's rooted in the sections of ISO 9001 instead of your actual processes. All of these potentially are going to be very significant concerns. Your IOP should definitely be reflective of who you are as an organization and what your processes are. We actually have a whole separate webinar on just this topic. It's called The Interaction of Processes and Its Importance to a Successful Audit. If you want to go on our YouTube page, you'll find a recording of that webinar. We do it live about every 6 months as well, if you'd like to join us for a live presentation of it. Again, the IOP is the single best indicator there is that you understand the process approach that's prescribed in ISO 9001 and all of the other ISO published standards. Another item that can prevent continuance is if you are not measuring the effectiveness of your processes. If you either have no process measures or you have process measures but no data. Now remember that ISO 9001 requires you to monitor, measure where applicable, and analyze your processes. So it is our expectation that every process on your interaction, all of your processes, should be monitored or measured. And there is supposed to be performance data available to prove the monitoring and measurement. Now, there are some standards that have minimum requirements for the amount of data that must be available. ITF, for example, mandates 12 months worth. For most other standards, as long as there is enough evidence to demonstrate that you're measuring the process, that'll be acceptable. And I do want to very quickly clarify, it is possible to have just a few measures of effectiveness that reflect on all processes. That is common, particularly for smaller organizations, and it is always considered acceptable. Another item that can prevent continuance is if you've not taken care of matters with your internal audit, starting with internal auditor competency records. Now, you are required to determine competency requirements for all operations within your system, and that includes conducting internal audits. So your auditor is going to be asking for evidence that your internal auditors meet those requirements. Now, there are certain standards in industries that require additional provisions for internal auditor competency. So it's definitely very important to be on top of the competency records for your internal audits, internal auditors rather, and for all other staff. If you have not had your internal audit, if you've had your internal audit but there's no records of it, or things of that nature, we are not going to be allowed to let you continue to stage 2, and that's a relatively new development. We've had folks that maybe you've been involved in past certifications, and it was considered acceptable to show evidence that the internal audit was planned to be completed prior to stage 2. Unfortunately, that permissiveness is no longer allowed. So basically, your internal audit has to be fully complete with the report prepared, the internal audit planning evidence available, nonconformances if they were written, that they've been responded to, and so forth. So again, definitely make sure that you've got the internal audit done and ready for review at that stage 1 audit. The same goes for management review. This is another item that in the past we were able to accept a plan for completion. Unfortunately now we have to demand that the management review be complete in order for you to continue to stage 2. Important note about management review. Remember that management review meetings are not supposed to just be a churn of data. They're supposed to be productive. We need to see evidence of, as the standard says, decisions and actions. So always bear in mind, this comes up sometimes for organizations that maintain PowerPoint slides. PowerPoints are great, but they don't often reflect on what the decisions and actions were, what the outputs were from the management review process. So bear that in mind as well. Now, all stage 1 audit reports are subject to review by a member of the PJR Executive Committee to make sure that any decision reached was appropriate and fair. Now, I mention this because rarely, it doesn't happen a lot, thankfully, but sometimes an auditor will recommend an organization for continuance to stage 2, and the executive committee may have to override that decision and say, no, we can't permit this client to continue. We have some things that need to be resolved. Now, all stage 1 audits, if you have a result that you don't agree with, if the auditor says you're not ready to continue to stage 2 and you disagree, if you cannot resolve that matter with your auditor, we do afford you the right to a dispute or an appeal. And that is discussed in our Pro 10 procedure. So if you go to our website at pjr.com, go to the very bottom of the page, you'll find a link entitled Registration Document Download. You can use that to get a copy of the Pro 10. We actually have a whole separate webinar on the dispute process as well. Now, if the recommendation is that you must repeat the stage 1 audit, your best bet is going to be to work from the audit report that you were given to take care of the issues that were raised. Now, you are permitted to remain in contact with your auditor and with our team here at PJR headquarters to discuss what you're doing and make sure that you're on the right path to make sure that you have a better result at the repeat stage 1 audit. Now, you will receive a contract amendment for the repeat stage 1 assessment, and in most cases, it's going to mean that your stage 2 audit is going to get pushed back. This is precisely why we recommend a minimum of 30 days between stage 1 and stage 2, and really 45 days or more is better. And it's why we try to warn our clients that back-to-back stage 1 and stage 2 audits are problematic and they can lead to significant issues. Bear in mind, we do have a 21-day cancellation policy with costs involved if it is necessary to cancel or postpone an audit. Now, if the recommendation is that there are significant issues, but you don't have to fully repeat the stage 1 assessment, again, you need to work from your report and fix the issues that were raised, but you're going to, in this instance, you're going to be expected to send evidence of your corrections to our team here at PJR headquarters. You will be contacted either by the auditor that did the audit or by a member of our technical staff that will review your updated materials and then make the final approval for continuance to stage 2. Obviously, if the recommendation is to proceed, again, work with your report and address any areas of concern that are identified in that report. It is always possible that if you ignore a legitimate concern, it may turn into a nonconformance on your stage 2 audit. We want our clients to feel confident and comfortable with the stage 1 audit process. As I've noted, we take a great deal of care in the pre-stage 1 phase, and we definitely train our auditors to be very supportive, our executive committee to work with you closely. We want this process to be value added for you and for your team. If you are coming up on a stage 1 assessment, we do send you our very best wishes for success in your upcoming audit process. I'd like to invite you to tune in for one of our other webinars. We have a presentation on ISO 9001. Our presentations for ISO 9001 are shown every 6 months roughly, and they represent an exploration of what ISO is all about and how you can be best prepared for an ISO 9001 audit. I mentioned earlier about our Interaction of Processes webinar. We have webinars on a wide variety of other topics, IETF 16949, on the appeals process, on Pro 3 and publicizing your certification, and many other topics. If you'd like to be kept informed of the latest news automatically, the best way for you to do that is to visit our website at www.pjr.com. Go to the bottom of the page, enter your email address in the provided space, and click subscribe. You will be opted in for updates on changes to the standards, upcoming webinars, and other helpful points of information. I do thank you for your time and attention. I'm going to go ahead and unlock the question portion of the dashboard if any of our attendees have questions today.